Kyiv woke up to fire and devastation. The night sky lit up with hundreds of missiles and drones as Russia unleashed its largest airstrike yet on the Ukrainian capital. Government buildings collapsed, civilians scrambled for safety, and Europe's heartland once again echoed with war. But the real question is, was this Russia's show of strength or its most desperate gamble yet? Welcome to Frontline, where we break down the geopolitics shaping our world. This is not just another Russian missile barrage. According to Ukrainian officials, more than 200 drones and ballistic missiles rained down on Kyiv in one coordinated assault. Power stations were destroyed, communication hubs were hit, and tragically, dozens of civilians lost their lives. For Ukraine, it was one of the darkest nights since the war began. But for Moscow, this attack carried a different message. One directed not only at Kyiv, but at Washington, Brussels, and every ally standing behind Ukraine. So, why now? Why such an unprecedented strike at a moment when Russia's own economy is buckling? Under sanctions and the front lines in eastern Ukraine remain largely stalemated. The timing is crucial. Just days ago, President Trump signaled what he called Phase 2 sanctions against Moscow, threatening to cut deeper into Russia's energy sector and restrict its access to global finance. This strike was Russia's answer. A brutal attempt to remind the West that Moscow still has the capacity to escalate. But here's the irony. What was meant to display strength might end up exposing weakness. By pouring so many missiles into a single night of terror, Russia risks depleting its already stretched stockpiles. Western intelligence has long suggested that Russia's weapons production is struggling to keep pace with the war's demands. Could this largest strike actually be a sign of desperation? A gamble to shock Ukraine and deter the West from tightening sanctions? In Kyiv, the response was immediate and defiant. Ukraine's air defense systems intercepted a majority of incoming drones and missiles, though many still slipped through. Images of firefighters pulling survivors from the rubble spread across global media, galvanizing outrage. President Zelensky vowed that Ukraine would not only recover, but retaliate on its own terms. And almost instantly, Washington and Brussels echoed his words. The US and European Union are now openly discussing coordinated retaliation, not just more sanctions, but potentially new military aid packages, advanced missile defense systems, and even broader deployments of NATO forces across Eastern Europe. This raises the stakes dramatically. Every time Russia escalates, it forces the West to respond, pulling both sides closer to a confrontation neither claims to want, but both seem unable to avoid. But let's step back and ask, who really benefits from this cycle of escalation? For Russia, the calculus is risky. Every missile fired is a drain on its economy, a resource that cannot easily be replaced. Meanwhile, Ukraine's resilience, bolstered by US and EU support, only grows stronger with each test. And for Washington, this latest strike provides a powerful argument for keeping Europe united, keeping NATO sharp, and keeping Russia isolated. Yet the danger lies in miscalculation. Could Moscow's attempt to shock Kyiv end up triggering something it cannot control? Perhaps an even deeper US involvement, or a NATO response that pushes this conflict into new territory. Is Putin playing with fire that could consume his own regime? There's also the question of Russia's so-called allies. While Moscow parades its ties with Beijing and Pyongyang, the cracks are visible. China, despite public gestures of solidarity, is wary of being dragged into a wider confrontation that could harm its economy. And North Korea's support, while loud, remains limited. Russia may boast about friends abroad, but when the missiles fall on Kyiv, it is Moscow alone that must answer for the destruction. For Ukraine, though battered, the message from this night is clear. Survival is victory. The BRP Sierra Madre stands in the South China Sea as a symbol of Philippine defiance against China, just as Kyiv now stands as a symbol of defiance against Russia's firepower. Small nations, when backed by strong allies, can stand tall against giants. As the smoke clears in Kyiv, the strategic consequences will ripple far beyond Ukraine. In Washington, policymakers see this as proof that retreat is not an option. In Brussels, leaders argue that a failure to act now would only invite more aggression. And across Eastern Europe, NATO allies brace for what could come next. So we return to our opening question. Was this Russia's show of strength, or its most desperate gamble yet? The answer may lie in what happens next. The US and EU follow through with tough, united retaliation. Moscow may find that its night of fire has backfired spectacularly. Instead of breaking Ukraine's spirit, it may have only solidified the alliance standing against it. This is the tragedy and irony of modern geopolitics. The more Russia tries to intimidate, the more it ends up isolating itself. And as Ukraine rebuilds from the ashes, the real question is whether Putin has overplayed his hand for the last time. Stay tuned with Frontline as we continue to track the fallout from Kyiv's darkest night, and what it means for the future of Europe, America, and the balance of power in the world.